Welcome back, my fellow adventurers, and today we're going to talk about my top 10 ways to stay safe abroad, because I want to make sure that you have the best experience when you go travel, explore the world, wander off the beaten path, whatever. So number one, we're going to start out with don't bring the expensive jewelry. And by that I mean make sure that you're aware of the general standard of living of wherever you're traveling to. So if that standard of living is lower than where you're from, don't bring anything flashy, don't bring the fancy watch, just don't bring anything that's going to make you stand out. You know, I've even found myself in places where I felt taking out my camera equipment wouldn't be the smartest move, and so I haven't. It means I didn't get any great photos or videos, but it's always better to be smarter. Number two, keep copies of your passport. So maybe I'm a little OCD about this, but I always have several color copies of my passport, and I have them hidden in various places. So maybe one in my travel organizer, maybe one in the room, whatever. I just want to make sure I'm covered, because especially if you have color copies, it is much, much easier to go to the embassy and get a replacement for your passport if anything were to happen. This one is a bit of a personal preference one, but get insurance on the expensive things that you are taking with you. I don't really like to travel with a lot of expensive stuff, but since I'm bringing a lot more camera gear with me these days, I just want the peace of mind. I want to know that if the worst were to happen, it wouldn't be the worst, if that makes sense. Basically, I want to go out and explore. I don't want to be distracted, worrying, anything like that. It's personal preference, but for me, it just gives me the peace of mind that I want when I'm abroad. Trust your gut. That tingly feeling in your stomach is usually right, so really start listening to that. You know when a situation is bad, you do. So I'm not saying assume the worst by far, but I'm saying that if you are going to walk down a dark alley at night and you get that funny feeling in your stomach, just find another way. Just really get good at listening to that gut of yours, because you know what? Most of the time, it's right. And this is a big one, but do not get drunk. If you are visibly intoxicated and stumbling around, you're making yourself an easy target, and you do not want to be an easy target. Most of the stories that I have heard of people being mugged or whatever usually happened when they were stumbling out of the bar at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I know that you're on vacation and you want to have a good time and you want to be able to relax, but do so with limits. Just make sure that you are in control and aware of your surroundings. Now, if you're in a safe place and you don't have to go anywhere, have a few more cocktails. Leave the cash. So you wouldn't go out at home with a ton of cash in your pocket and your passport with you. Definitely don't do it abroad either. I usually like to go out with about as much cash as I think I'm going to need for the day, probably giving myself a buffer of some extra just in case, but I'll leave most of the cash behind. And again, I will do so in various places to make sure that it's safe and hidden just in case. But the point is, if you go out with just a certain amount of cash, if anything were to happen, that's all you're losing. So you're not completely out. Blend in. And basically what I mean by that is don't do anything to make yourself stand out. Don't be loud, obnoxious, flashy in any kind of way, because you'll just make yourself a target. So while you may never completely blend in, just make sure you don't stand out. Share your itinerary. And this is kind of, especially if you're traveling solo, it's a big peace of mind to know that there's somebody out there who knows where you are, who knows where you're supposed to be and how you're getting there. I personally always share my itinerary with my mom because she makes me, but it's definitely good to know that somebody knows where you are. And there are some great apps out there to do so easily. I personally use TripIt, which puts your itinerary together in a really nice format, and you can just email it off to anybody you want to share it with. Be polite but firm. So this has a couple of meanings for me, and the first one is especially for you single traveling ladies out there. And it means that you are never alone. You're never alone, even if that's not true. Basically, your friends are at the hotel or they're meeting you somewhere, but you're never alone, because that really takes the vulnerability out of the equation for you in case anybody asks. And the second meaning for this is if you're being approached on the street by people trying to sell you things, I just always try to be polite in my no, but firm, and move on. It just doesn't invite a whole lot of exchange, and that way you feel confident in the fact that you're not being taken advantage of, but you obviously also don't want to be rude. So just politely say no thank you and move on. And lastly, know your prices. So this especially comes in handy when you're trying to get a taxi, for example, from the airport, because I feel like if there's going to be a place for extortionate pricing, that's going to be a big one. So if you research beforehand, how much a taxi is supposed to be from the airport, it gives you a lot of bargaining power when you're there, and you can feel confident in what you're paying. I think it saved me, on average, maybe about $10 to $15 at a time. And while that's not a huge amount, it definitely adds up. And the same is true for any activities that you plan on doing. You can do your research beforehand, find out what the good companies are, find out how much you can expect to be paying for things, and know you're not being taken advantage of, and feel good about the amount of money that you're paying for things. So there you go. Those are my standards, rules, regulations, whatever you want to call them, that I travel by. So I really hope this was helpful for you guys, and if it was, give it a thumbs up. If there are any tips that I've missed or suggestions that you have, please share them with us, comment below, and make sure you subscribe for lots more tips to make sure that you get the most out of your trips when you're traveling, exploring, wandering off that beaten path. Until next time, be good to one another and keep adventuring.